A few years ago, a young guy and his fiancée went to Paris. Honeymoon. When the happy couple wandered around the city, looking at the sights, they decided to go shopping. The wife went into a fashion clothing store and tried on several dresses, and the husband gave them outside in the locker room. Quite a lot of time has passed, and my wife has not come out. The husband began to wonder why she was taking so long. He asked one of the store's employees to hurry up his wife. The employee, coming out of the locker room, said that his wife was not there. Not believing it, he checked the locker room himself, but it turned out to be completely empty. They searched the whole store, but they never found any trace of her. The husband thought that his wife must have played a prank on him, so he went back to his hotel and waited for her. But his wife never showed up. He became more and more anxious. When she didn't return the next morning, he was confused and contacted the Paris police. For 48 hours, all the Paris authorities searched for the missing person. They published her signs on radio stations, on TV channels. She was described as a tall woman with a birthmark on her left cheek. It seemed that the whole of Paris had risen in search of the missing woman. No one saw her. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. The police did everything in their power, but after 3 weeks they stopped searching. The husband began to suspect that his wife had other ideas about marriage. She just ran away and left him. 6 months later, exhausted and depressed, he finally left Paris and returned to his city. Months turned into years, and the man stopped looking for his beautiful wife. But his life completely fell apart. He was so consumed with grief that he could not work properly and continue to live in peace. He moved aimlessly from place to place, from country to country, where fate threw him. 2 years later, he found himself at some carnival, stopped in front of an old tent. The sign above the entrance read "The House of Oddities." Interested, he went inside and was stunned by what he saw. He saw a collection of horrible, disfigured freaks placed in a cage. Strange freaks were terrible examples of human suffering. In the last dirty cage, he was horrified to notice signs of attractiveness. A hunched, scarred, crippled woman was moaning, making strange animal sounds. The sign on her cage read, "The Worm Woman." She had no arms and legs, they were cut off. Her face was scarred from stitches left over from the horrific surgery, and her mouth was sewn shut. When she looked at him with her sad eyes, he screamed, recognizing the mole on her cheek. Many high school students get seasonal jobs in the summer. This is a story about a young man who got a job at a cemetery. Of course, this is not a job you can dream of, but his father was friends with a local undertaker and convinced his son to try to work, despite his fear. The young man's job was to dig graves, sweep paths from leaves and cough grass. The most terrible thing for the young man were the crypts in which many people were buried. He tried to push away from himself the thought that so many bodies rest in one room in closed cells. The boy gradually got used to working in the cemetery, until one night the unthinkable happened. The young man was sweeping the floor and polishing tablets in one of the crypts, when suddenly a strong wind blew and slammed the door to the crypt. The young man realized that he was trapped. His worst nightmare began to come true. The young man shouted, but it was useless. The undertaker's house was located far from the crypt. Time passed, and the young man realized that he could only hope for himself. Opposite the crypt door, at the top of the ceiling there was a small window that he could climb through. The difficulty was that above this window there were 2 tiers of shelves with crabs. Of course, the coffins were not just on the shelves, they were closed in stone boxes, so the young man decided to climb up them and get out through the window. Having gathered on a stone slab, the boy was right in front of the window. He was about to roll over outside when he suddenly felt that the old stone slab began to crack under his weight. The stove couldn't stand it. The boy broke it with 1 foot, turned out to be a foot in a coffin. He writhed in terrible pain, imagining the splinters of boards and rusty nails tearing his skin. Gathering all his strength, he still managed to get out. He began to call for help. At his cry, the undertaker came running. He saw the wounds on his leg and immediately took him to the hospital. The doctor who examined the boy asked where he got such wounds. I was just unsuccessfully chopping wood, and the chips got a little bit, they scratched me. But these are not scratches, they are bites, the doctor said. I was lying on the bed and couldn't sleep. It was well past midnight by the clock, but sleep never came. I had to go to school tomorrow, and I had to prepare for the test. But in the 9th grade, not all teenagers think about studying. Thinking about tomorrow, I began to gradually close my eyes and go deeper into sleep, when suddenly the phone rang. Startled by surprise, and waking up at the same moment, I reached under the pillow. I took out my cell phone and looked at the screen. Already thinking normally, I saw that the number was undecided, and on the screen it was written unknown. I picked up the phone. There was a moment's silence, and a hoarse female voice said, "Leave it to me." Confused, I dropped the call and threw everything on a mistake. I went back to sleep. A minute later, the call was repeated. I already felt uneasy, and I turned off the phone. The strange woman now called constantly, both day and night. I couldn't stand it anymore, but I didn't tell my mom. I added the number to the blacklist many times, but it was useless. The days passed, and then one day before going to bed I received a text message from this opponent. "Don't peek." My stomach rumbled, and I was scared. It's night, mom's at work, and someone opens the front door. I thought it was mom, and pretended to be asleep. She came in and walked over to the bed. I opened my eyes, but all I saw was a shadow near the door. I almost died. This feeling cannot be described. It feels like there were otherworldly forces in my room just now. It was cold and smelled of Karoo. And here's the SMS again. "I told you not to peek." My heart almost jumped out. Hiding under the blanket, I quietly fell asleep. This girl never woke up again. 3 days later, a new text message from this creature came to her phone. "Sorry, I got the wrong number." Driving under a streetlight, suddenly I saw in the rearview mirror in my back seat an elderly man in a plaid shirt. What was that? I don't know. Then I was shaking for a whole day.